And this webinar is part of a series of events hosted by CMT. Please keep an eye on the Company of New Pastors page of the PC-USA website for announcements about upcoming events. And after the webinar, you'll be able to find a link to the replay of today's event on both the Company of New Pastors and the PC-USA financial aid web pages. Now, we're doing something new today. Throughout the webinar, you're invited to join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag PCUSACMT, and you'll find the hashtag on the bottom of the screen during the presentation if you need a reminder. And at any time during the presentation, you are invited to type questions that you'd like Laura to answer at the end during the Q&A session. And the GoToWebinar control panel, move your cursor to where it says questions and type your question. We'd like to make questions as concise as possible so we have time to get through as many as we can. Now let's meet our presenter. Laura Bryan has been serving the Presbyterian Mission Agency as the administrator of the Presbyterian Church's Student and Parent Loan Program since 2000. Her portfolio of programs expanded to include aid to seminary students in 2003. She has managed the Mission Agency's financial aid program since 2007, and she says it's a far cry from the career in politics that she seemed destined for 30 years ago, when she was dropping out of college every other year to direct phone bank operations for political campaigns. Laura is an avid gardener and dog mom to Jasper and Jack, and she's not so secretly in training for the day when reading becomes an Olympic event. So now I'll turn the floor over to Laura. Take it from here.
Hi, I'm Laura Bryan, and thank you for joining us. It's really gratifying to see so many people are interested in the subject of managing educational debt. So before we get started, I would like to take a moment to think about our friends and colleagues in Charleston. So if you just join with me to take a moment to pray for them, to pray for the lives that have been lost, and to pray for the Emmanuel community. Most high, glorious God, enlighten the darkness of our minds. Give us a right faith, a firm hope, and a perfect charity, so that we may always and in all things act according to your holy will. Amen. Okay. I made some assumptions before when I started putting this presentation together. I believe that I am talking to students who are within a year of graduation, or to people who have graduated and are either seeking a call or have started their first call. So most, if not all of you, have been exit interviewed at least once for federal student aid. I'm really going to focus on the things that you need to know about student loans as a church professional, rather than go really in depth on student loans. And each page that I show you is going to have links that you can follow back to the source material that we work with. So what are student loans? Student loans are one of the most highly protected forms of debt that exists today. It's an unsecured debt, so there's no collateral that's attached to it. Student loans are reported to all the major credit reporting agencies, so your performance on a student loan is really important when you go to purchase a car, to buy your first home, when perhaps your spouse, whose credit becomes connected to yours, is seeking employment in a new community. Your credit score is important in all of those contexts. There is no statute of limitations on collection. There's no distinction between private debt and federal debt as it relates to student loans. This is important because some of the protections that exist for your federal debt don't exist with private student loans, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Remedies in bankruptcy are rare. On the other hand, there are some tools that you can use to manage your debt. If you were in circumstances where you couldn't pay your debt back, there are possibilities that don't exist with normal forms of debt. But it does give the Department of Education great latitude. They can garnish your wages. They can seize your tax returns. They can take a portion of a Social Security check. So these are things that for instance, your credit card company cannot do without a court order. So that's what makes a student loan unique, but also it's what made Congress decide that the borrowers needed certain protections and they needed certain tools to be able to manage their debt that you wouldn't have, again, let's say a credit card, which is another form of unsecured debt. There are possibilities for discharge of your student loan. I use the phrase death and disability because it's what is said on the federal website. The more common circumstance that we run into with pastors is disability, and there's a profound lack of awareness that disability discharge exists. So sometimes we don't find out that someone needs that assistance until they've left their call. So it's just something to keep in mind, not only for yourself, but as you're serving your congregation, that disability is a condition that allows you to discharge usually 100% of the debt. So the first stop for anybody who has student loans is to go visit the National Student Loan Data System. You've been there before. You may have signed your student loan master promissory note at this website. It's going to tell you what kind of loans you have, how much you owe, and who services the loan. The best thing that's on the site is the loan calculator. It pulls the information they have about your loans, so you don't have to go and pull your paperwork together and find that and put it in. It pulls all of that, and then it lays out every option that is available to you. And there are 5 repayment plans that you may be able to participate in. So it's nice just to have it do it for you. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau also has a loan calculator. You have to do a little bit more of entering the data yourself. And I'm just going to jump out real quick to show you what the National Student Loan Data System's website looks like. Again, I think you've probably seen this before. So here's the website. The one thing I wanted to point out on this website is the exit counseling. The exit counseling is, if you don't remember your exit counseling, this is an opportunity to just do it again. And it goes through each of the elements of the loan, and then it will have little quizzes at the end. So you can test your comprehension. If you didn't get something, you can go back and go over it again. One of the other things that we recommend, because there's one area where the National Student Loan Data System is incomplete, and that's private loans. So if you think you have a private loan or you think you might have a private loan, the place to double check that is your annual credit report. This is the free annual credit report. There are websites that are not the free annual credit report. And just be careful when you get there. You want the site that is authorized by the U.S. government, and it is called annualcreditreport.com. So we'll move on to our next slide. I'm really crazy about the repayment page on the federal website. It goes through each of the 5 different types of repayment plans that you can select, but it also talks about some of the debt relief options that you have. What most of us are familiar with from student loans is the in-school grace period, or the in-school deferment. They're actually 2 separate things. The in-school deferment is what happens when you're enrolled at least half-time, where your loan may not be accruing interest if it's subsidized, or it's accruing at a lower rate if it's not, and there's no payment activity that's expected. The grace period mimics that for a period of 6 months for the direct loan, 9 months for the Perkins. So probably everyone who is listening in has at least experienced the in-school portion and may be experiencing the grace portion. Most students will enter repayment between the months of November and January because that's typically 6 to 9 months after you've graduated from, in your case, it would be seminary. You don't have to select a payment plan before you enter repayment, but it's not a bad idea to start looking at them now and thinking strategically about how your goals are best served by various repayment models. There are at least 3 different types of income-based repayment. One is the income contingent repayment, and again, I probably should jump out to the federal site so we can view some of that content. The income contingent repayment makes an assumption that your income is going to start off pretty low at the beginning of the time that you start repayment, but it will increase incrementally. After 3 or 4 years, your income will increase, and then within year 7 of graduation, you'll probably be earning enough to make payments that are larger than your standard plan. I don't think those assumptions are necessarily there's no way for us to predict what's going to make sense for you, because in many cases it's not just your income that is going to determine this. It's a spouse's income. It's where you're called, what kind of expenses you have to live in the place that you've been called to. So if you look at all of those elements, income contingent repayment will work for some people. Some people will need the income-based repayment, which is based on a percentage of your adjusted gross income. You may need to take an unemployment deferment, which is actually not a repayment plan. It's a remedy for repayment. But so I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is there is no one-size-fits-all repayment plan for anyone who is preparing to accept a call to a congregation. It's all of those elements that you need to consider. Where do you live? Are you married? Is there a second income? How much do you have to repay every month? What are your long-term goals? All of those things need to be factored in. And so when you look at the calculator and you can see all of the different plans that are available to you, I think that gives you more options and a greater ability to plan, think, dream about who you're called to be and what you're called to do. Your student loan payment doesn't have to get in the way of that. Some of the relief options, again, deferment is the most common. It is a limited benefit. There's only 18 months of deferment for unemployment. The main problem that church professionals run into requesting unemployment deferment is that our call process does not satisfy the requirement to be job seeking in any field. You would have to register with an unemployment agency, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So if it's within the scope of your plan, it's certainly an option that you might want to consider. After deferment, forbearance is the next option that's available. We generally suggest to people that they don't use forbearance if they can avoid it. Forbearance means that your interest is going to continue to accrue, and it's going to capitalize at the end of the forbearance period. The other thing that happens at the end of forbearance is your loan has to be recalculated for the payments that you missed and the interest that is accrued over that period of time. Your payments increase sometimes a lot. So if you would need to be in forbearance, the best thing to do is to move to an income-based repayment plan. So income-based repayment plans. These plans are sensitive to income, family size, and they have limited cost of living adjustments for borrowers living in places like Alaska and Hawaii where expenses are higher. If these plans, when you're looking at the calculator inside of the National Student Loan Data System, if it says these plans are not available, contact your servicer. You probably need to consolidate your loans. Anyone who either borrowed or consolidated after 2007 should have these particular payment plans available to them. The other thing that's really beneficial about IBR or pay-as-you-earn is that there's a partial interest subsidy. And this isn't the same thing as your subsidized loan where the interest it appeared to not accrue. It was actually being paid by the federal government. What happens in IBR and pay-as-you-earn is if your payment does not rise to a level sufficient to address the accrual of interest on a monthly basis, the element of interest that cannot be paid is paid by the federal government for 36 months. What is the practical impact of this? Your balance doesn't increase. You're making payments, your balance probably is not going to drop because the payment that you're making is going to be applied to interest first. But your payments don't increase, and it gives you a breather. And the bad thing about it, the principal isn't going down. So that's something to think about. Again, when you're thinking about your long-term plans, when do you want to have your loan completely paid off? Income-based repayment may not satisfy that desire to have your loan paid off more quickly, but it's a better option for people who are concerned about their monthly budgets. At the beginning of this, I talked a little bit about discharge and forgiveness. These are two different things. Student loans can be discharged when someone dies or when they become disabled. Forgiveness is different. It's a condition that implies that there's an exchange, and it's usually service. It almost always requires loan performance elements. And so what does that mean? Loan performance elements are usually attached to incentives, and they are trying to compel a certain kind of behavior out of the borrower. In this case, it's on-time payment. So any kind of program that offers forgiveness for a direct loan or a Perkins loan is usually going to have a on-time performance element that you're going to have to follow. This is particularly important in respect to deferment and forbearance because these are not repayment statuses. These are relief from repayment statuses. And the months that you spend in deferment or forbearance cannot count towards either forgiveness or, well, I think we already talked about that. It doesn't count as a productive payment month. So it does trigger reamortization of the loan. Public service loan forgiveness is probably the topic we talk about the most with recent graduates. Public service loan forgiveness allows for forgiveness of loan balances after 10 years of eligible public service and 120 consecutive on-time payments. That's probably the harder part of the test to meet, but let's talk about that a little bit. So the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program was created in 2007. The first loans eligible for forgiveness will mature in October of 2017. So no one has received forgiveness yet. Eligible service will not include activities related to worship, proselytizing, or religious instruction. The FTE, or the full-time equivalent, is 1,560 hours, or a 30-hour week. Probably the best way to think about it is The program is intentionally including school teachers. So since they don't work in the summer, an accommodation had to be made for that. If your hours are being certified, if you're participating in this program now, you've submitted a certification, our understanding is that certification of hours is not a guarantee of forgiveness. Pastors applying for public service loan forgiveness, there's a greater likelihood that your request for loan forgiveness will be denied. I'm not telling you shouldn't apply for it, though. I think you should plan to repay whatever you've borrowed and apply for any relief that you think that you might be eligible for. There's a new employment certification form that came out a couple of, it's actually been almost a year. And we're going to go visit that really quickly. So the new form is it's a little more explicit in the new form what they're looking for on the certifications from the borrowers and from the borrower's employer. And I'm going past the section. Okay, I've passed it up. Anyway, who should fill this out for you? Probably your clerk of session, but I think you should probably talk to your presbytery as well. And let me go back to here. Because public service loan forgiveness is probably not going to be available to all of our pastors, the Presbyterian Church U.S.A. has a couple of debt assistance programs. Seminary debt assistance actually predates public service loan forgiveness. The Board of Pensions is kind of a leader in thinking about this. 10 years before we were even beginning to dream about any kind of debt relief program, seminary debt assistance was created. And well, I'm a big admirer of this program. Anyway, what does SDA do? Serves teaching elders in the first 7 years of ministry, serving in call pastoral positions full-time, in a Presbyterian church that has 150 or fewer members and an annual budget of $250,000 or less. If you're looking for a call in Church Leadership Connection, you may find positions that have been pre-certified as being SDA qualifying positions. And of course, that's great to know. The thing I really like about this program is there's an awareness on the part of the Board of Pensions that all of your debt may not have been acquired in a student loan program. So instead of, well, they write the check to the participant, and you can use that money to pay down the debt that's the most onerous for you. If that's a credit card, then that's a credit card. I know many of us charged our books to credit cards and thought that that debt would go away, and then something happened, and then something else happened, and suddenly it's 3 years later and you've got a credit card that's almost maxed out, and it's occurring at a much higher interest rate than your student loan payment. The nice thing about the way this program was set up, you can pay down that credit card debt. The Transformational Leadership Debt Assistance Program is the Presbyterian Mission Agency program that was created to address the student who, or the borrower who is not served in the Seminary Debt Assistance Program. So this program serves teaching elders with educational debt, also serving small congregations, but these people are called to temporary and or part-time pastoral positions. We are using our student loan donor restricted funds. So we have to pay down the student loan. And the mechanism that we use is we provide $5,000 in a loan, and we send the loan proceeds to the borrower's servicer. It pays down the principal balance, and so 18 months we forgive that. If you as a participant have additional debt, you can come back and ask for another $5,000 if you continue to serve in a temporary or part-time pastoral position. We have quite a few people in this program who have other forms of employment. Some of them are actually public service loan forgiveness eligible school teachers. That's fine. That's not going to disbar you from eligibility to participate in the Transformational Leadership Debt Assistance Program. We only look at your church employment, and if you are employed full-time in one congregation and you are serving part-time in another, it's only the part-time service that is considered for the program. So that is also a possibility. The total lifetime benefit for this program is $15,000. I wanted to talk a little bit about what do you do when things go wrong. So we hear a lot from people who are a little bit frustrated with their loan servicers. There are 10 loan servicers in the U.S. that are servicing all the U.S. Department of Education debt. And some perform better than others. That's probably the best way to say that. So we have some suggestions for you. We think that you need to read everything carefully, and when you submit your forms when you're seeking any form of relief, make sure that you've read carefully enough to understand what your required documentation is. One of the most common reasons that people are denied deferment or forbearance is because there's an element of documentation that they were supposed to submit with the request that was never received. And so it's recorded that their request has been opened, but there's no determination that's ever made about it because it's incomplete. So make sure you read through it and send any required documentation. Keep a copy of what you've sent, and then if you haven't heard back within 10 days, check in with them. You may find that there is something missing, and that would be an opportunity to send it. If you run into a problem with your servicer, there is a checklist that you're supposed to use before you contact the Student Loan Ombudsman group, and it's probably a good idea to do so. It's a long checklist. It's a painfully long checklist, but it's very thorough, and you may find a self-correction before you get to the point where you need to go to the Ombudsman group. If you reach this point and you're still not satisfied, that's when I would go to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I'd step outside of the federal system at that point. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was chartered by Congress. They're charged with the responsibility for dealing with particularly student loan debt disputes, and they have a great deal of experience and a huge database of problems. So I think you'll find them very, very helpful. One thing I wanted to highlight, there are private document processing firms that are now soliciting people through robocalls and emails, through teaser ads on sites like Facebook. And they're offering to help people obtain loan forgiveness. What they're really doing is offering to fill out paperwork for you, usually charging you between $500 and $1,000 for the privilege of having someone fill out your paperwork for you. I got called last week by one, and all they did was point me at the National Student Loan Data System and ask me for my credit card information. So this is nothing that you can't do yourself. It may seem tedious at times, but There is nothing about about looking at the loan calculator and figuring out which plan best suits your plans that you can't do yourself. And so a couple of closing thoughts. The existence of so many different repayment plans makes student loan repayment more flexible, but it's also more complex. I think it's a good idea to reevaluate your repayment plans and your long-term plans for your career and your family at least once a year. We are available to help. There's other help that's available to us as church professionals. If you're a member of the Board of Pensions, our Employee Assistance Program includes a financial counseling service, and I've included the link to that. I've used it. I like to use it every 5 years, just in my thinking about what do I want to do, and what kind of travel am I interested in, and what kind of investments do I want to make in the education of my nieces and nephews. It just helps me organize that a little bit better and think about where I want to how I want to manage my personal investments, my savings, and the debt that I have. So I hope you have an opportunity to use it. It's a great program. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Laura. And now is the time when you get to benefit from everything Laura knows and to ask her your questions. So make sure you move your cursor to the question section of the GoToWebinar control panel and type away. Laura, our first question.
Dana, do I need to move to someplace else on?
No, you're just great.
Okay.
So the first question is really a clarification. And it says that you mentioned that pastors would be eligible for debt forgiveness if they certify 1,560 hours annually that are not related to worship or proselytizing. Can you explain?
Or religious instruction.
Yeah, can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Well, anecdotally, we are hearing from pastors who are essentially reporting two very different things: that they are certifying and that they are receiving letters from the U.S. Department of Education telling them that they're ineligible to certify. And there doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of difference between what they're filling out on the certification forms. We were seeing more people who were failing the certification test before they changed the form 18 months ago. And when they changed the form 18 months ago, it seemed to ease the evaluation. But we're not clear on why that's so. And that's why I think if you believe that you meet the threshold, that you have 1,560 hours of work that you've performed in the last year for a nonprofit that does not involve worship, proselytizing, or religious instruction, you should apply.
Thanks, Laura. And our next question asks about hospital chaplains. Could you explain how the process might be any different for getting approved for loan forgiveness in comparison with parish pastoring?
No, I think that the test is still the same. So I used to work in a hospital with chaplains, so I'm thinking it would be an easier test to meet potentially. But as long as your employer agrees that you have performed 1,560 hours of work that for a nonprofit that does not involve worship, proselytizing, or religious instruction, you meet the test.
All right. Our next question asks, if you are employed by a church but not in the role of pastor, are there programs that you might qualify for?
Programs from the Presbyterian Church or just programs in general?
The question just asks programs.
Okay.
So,
well, yes and no. From the Presbyterian Church, in the spring, we're going to roll out something called, well, it's already out. It's just not in a congregation yet. Season of Service Loan Assistance was developed about 2.5 years ago. We told the board that we would roll it out in 3 phases. The first phase would involve national programs like the Young Adult Volunteer Program. And the second phase would involve organizations like camps, conference centers, and colleges. And the third phase would involve our congregations. It provides a benefit of $250. It's a stipend that's paid to, again, to the student loan servicer because, of course, we are using our donor-restricted student loan fund. It's a $250 a month stipend paid to the servicer on behalf of someone who is working either in a part-time, a temporary, or a volunteer position. In the third iteration of the program, it would be in a congregation. The thing that we're working on right now to get ready for the rollout is we're developing a form for the congregation to fill out. And the form for the congregation is just going to describe the work that this person will be performing. We want to get the congregation signed into the program first so that when the participant comes along, or perhaps they've already arrived, but when the participant enters the program, that we already have a reporting system so that nobody gets stranded performing service, that there's no one there to certify. So that particular, we're in a reading group right now on the church form, and I expect that to go up on our website when we come back from the Christmas break in January. We'll solicit congregations for the first quarter of the year, which is to say we will be looking for congregational partners for the first quarter of the year. And then in March, we'll start looking for applicants from the congregations that have entered the program.
Thanks, Laura. The next question is the seminary debt assistance considered income that needs to be reported to the IRS?
I'm kind of a stickler myself on things like that. I would report it. It's a small amount of money, though. It's the reason that the Board of Pensions, and also the reason that the TILDA program takes something like a $6,000 total benefit and breaks it into pieces is to make sure that in the year that you are receiving the money, that it isn't going to impose an undue tax burden for you. So the $1,500 that you would receive every year from SDA, or the $5,000 that you have forgiven, because it's not when the money's conveyed in the case of TILDA, it's when it's forgiven every other year. It's stretched out that way on purpose. I hope that makes sense. But yes, I think you should report it. It's income.
Thanks. Next question. What conditions do congregations need to fulfill to be part of seminary debt assistance? Is there anything other than the size of congregation and annual budget?
For SDA?
For seminary debt assistance. This question asker is noticing that none of the churches she matches on CLC qualify.
Okay, if I'm understanding your question correctly, this is about the congregation?
Yeah, are there specific conditions that they need to meet in order to be part of seminary debt assistance?
Okay, beyond the congregation can have no more than 150 members, and the budget is no more than $250,000. That's for the congregation. Those are the qualifiers.
Okay. If that doesn't answer your question asker, feel free to expand on that. The next question is, I live in a manse and I know that my AGI does not reflect my total compensation. Should I use alternative documentation?
No. And please do not volunteer documentation that's not requested. We've had this conversation a couple of times with the Department of Education. We've expressed some concern about it, but the answer to it is pretty simple. Military members are also affected by the same rule. They get allowances. They may be living in government quarters, but AGI is what is used. So you don't have to report additional income or additional in-kind income. You are not the only people who will benefit from that.
The next person states that he is in default and asks for strategies for what to do next.
Okay. Well, first, on one of the slides, there should have been my email address, and my email address is Laura, L-A-U-R-A, .Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N, @pcusa.org. So send me an email and tell me that you need an appointment to talk to me about the fact that you're in default, and let me know when would be a good time to talk to you. There's really there's no one-size-fits-all default remedy. There are a couple of different ways to approach it, and we'll need to gather some information and look at the specifics of your situation to figure out the best and most advantageous way to approach your default. But I just want this to be very clearly understood. Default is not a terminal condition. It is repairable, and you can move on, and you can fix your credit, and don't wait. Do that today.
And Laura, it looks like we have time for one more question. And this person says that it's not just the loans, it's too many bills in general. What can you suggest for looking at the larger picture?
Well, for student loans, as much as you can possibly consolidate, I generally think consolidation is a good idea for people who say too many bills. There are some downsides to consolidation. There are some things that you may lose. And there are some things you should be really careful about. You never want to consolidate private and federal debt together. Anyone who would consider doing that is actually taking you out of the federal student loan system, and you lose a lot of benefits, including the discharge benefit and the loan forgiveness benefits. So that's something to think about. But for other forms of consolidation, again, I think I would start with the Board of Pensions and use that benefit if it's available. And I think I'd be really careful about where I consolidated my student loans. Just read through everything. If you need some help with that, call us. We're happy to help.
Thanks, Laura. And if you didn't get a chance to ask your question today, do make note of Laura's contact information, and you're invited to be in touch with her office if you need further information. And now, as our time is up, Laura, would you send us out today with a word of prayer?
Oh, certainly. Now, Excuse me. And now, Christ is within you, giving hope of the glory to come. Go out in the world with a daring and tender love. The world is waiting. Go in peace, and in all that you do it through the love of God, the peace of Jesus Christ, and the communion of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for your time today.
Mm-hmm.